Good morning, everybody. If we make a start. Welcome to the meeting of Corporate Review for the 7th of September. I believe we are broadcasting as well as being here live in person. Please do not swear. We'll start with apologies. We have got apologies from Councillor James Salisbury and also Councillor Bob Spencer. May struggle to get in.
And me for leaving early, Chair. And me for leaving early, Chair.
Yes, and we have a couple of people leaving early as well. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, I'll take that as no. The minutes of the previous meeting, hopefully you'll have seen the latest version of the pack, which includes the minutes of the meeting of the 29th of July. There has been a bit of a last minute change on what's on the website, but the 29th of July was the last meeting that we held, and hopefully members have seen that now. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true record? Okay, thank you very much. Which moves us swiftly on to item 4, which is climate change, both the annual report and also the action plan 2. We have here the cabinet member with responsibility, which is Simon Tagg, and I'll pass over to him and he'll introduce other people that alongside.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. On my left is James Cartwright, who's the Interim Sustainability Manager, and on the right is Clive Thompson, which everybody will know previously anyway, but they're going to be assisting me today. But introduction from me, obviously the County Council recognises climate change and creating a sustainable environment as one of the biggest challenges facing the world today. We have an agenda that we are having our council strategic plan, and it's one of the 4 key principles is tackling climate change. The climate change annual report before you today and the action plan 2 will go to Cabinet in October and will form the basis of a member event in November where we'll officially launch climate change action plan 2. So today is for Scrutiny to give us some feedback, to give us some suggestions and to ask questions about the plan before you. Looking at the annual report, it showcases progress against action plan 1. Some of the highlights include a 25% reduction in carbon emissions. Good progress has been made on despite the challenges of COVID. Energy efficiency is key to that, and the LED street lighting is an example of how we've moved forward rolling that out across the county. Also working with our maintained schools, working with districts and boroughs on waste collections, looking at solar farm projects and working with Staffordshire businesses to reduce their carbon emissions through the Staffordshire Environmental Business Network. Also, the report contains details of the Climate Change Fund, which was the members' fund from last year, and also the Recovery Report contains a breakdown of the spend per district in that fund last year. Work has been going on for some time now over the summer with officer theme groups, 5 theme groups, working on putting together Action Plan 2, which is a 5-year plan which will have an annual review. Producing a green shoots document to map out how we can deliver the net zero target, which is getting our house in order. Research and innovation on carbon offset options. Working proactively with partners to include climate change mitigation in the planning process. Creating green infrastructure, getting those things in as we build housing estates, as we build road networks and other things, have a green infrastructure right at the beginning of that. The rollout of e-charging points, a programme for tree planting and habitat protection and improvement across the county, and also, importantly, flood mitigation measures reacting to the changing climate as part of this agenda. And also carry on delivering Action Plan 1, which that is the outcome is attached in the review, but there are still ongoing things that will carry over into Action Plan 2. And also a refresh of the Climate Change Fund, again, which will be launched in November at the members' event. But that's my introduction, Chair. Any questions or comments are welcome, and I will bring in officers as appropriate. But I'll just ask James if he wants to add anything further before you open it to questions.
Morning, everyone. If I just add a couple of
quick comments about climate change annual report 2021. This builds on the strategic development framework that went through Cabinet in February. Hopefully it's a fairly easy read. As you go through, it must be I've just flagged that these are the emissions from 1920. We're always a year behind. We count our emissions and then promote all the good work that's carried on. As Simon said earlier, we've had quite a substantial reduction past year. It's mainly due to our change to a renewable electricity tariff. And our emissions in 1920 were just shy of 38,000 tonnes. As you go through the report, there's comparison charts there on carbon emissions broken down by service area, just for more information and transparency. Also gives you figures in tonnes as well, which will help when this document goes public. The achievements are broken down into the 5 priority themes, which shows synergy with the strategic development framework in carbon reduction, natural environment, waste, behavioural change and air quality. Also goes into next steps, just to give some context on the journey that we've got to 2050 and the amount of reduction that we need in the year to achieve our vision. 3 appendices that are attached really put more meat on the bone. The first one is our approach and gives us some examples of where we came from. It states in there that in 1990 we were over 200,000 tonnes. To just give you that sort of journey that we've been on anyway. Appendix 2 is really just how we measure the carbon, so we're completely transparent. And like Simon said, Appendix 3 is a brief breakdown and summary of some of the projects in Climate Change Action Fund from the previous year. I think when I pulled together the report, I was really encouraged in the good work that our officers and service areas are doing on a daily basis. And I hope that's reflected in some of the examples that we've given.
Thank you. Councillor Charles Atkins.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, congratulations on the early wins. But these are the easy bit, you know, and it obviously gets harder from then on. And I think if these plans had been presented to us 2 years ago, I would have been totally satisfied. But my main concern is that 2 years on, we don't have any timelines. You know, it's great to have a sort of wish list of what we want to do. But it seems to me that, you know, we're talking about looking at good practice. But why haven't we been looking at good practice over the last 2 years? You know, it seems to be very much, this is what we're going to do in the future. And, you know, we are talking about a climate change emergency. We're not talking about, you know, something that might happen in a few decades' time. We have it now. You know, we've seen it now. So that worries me. Now, for instance, you take something like habitat management under natural environment. You talk about managing habitat. When I asked the question about involving the community and highways in managing grass verges, greater biodiversity, to be honest, I was given the brush off. Look at the website. We cut them 6 times a year. You know, it's not joined up. You know, if we're talking about climate change, we have to be joined up. You know, we have to be about managing grass verges. I've just come back from France, and there you have, you know, vibrant grass verges. You have towns of just 4,000 people with electric charging points for vehicles, with the first 30 minutes being free. You know, I understood, San, from Radio 4, that we have more electric vehicle charging points in Westminster than the whole of the West Midlands. I don't know if that's true. That's what certainly said on Radio 4. I don't know if that's true. And then we're looking at the whole issue, you know, so on habitat management, how do we manage progress? How do we score progress? How do we measure it? You know, I don't know how we're going to measure these things. That's what worries me. It's great to say that we're going to do this, but how do we measure progress on something like habitat management and biodiversity? Because I haven't seen that within the documents. And then we're talking about air quality. And again, you know, and I know Jill will come in on this, you know, you've got a situation where homeschool transport has not changed according to your graph. There's been no change whatsoever. And yes, of course, there's lots of need for taxis for special educational needs, and they're now talking about grouping those people together perhaps. God knows why that wasn't done years ago. But also, you have, and I know that Jill will come in on this, the temporary vacant seat scheme, which, has been going on for decades. I know because I tried to take a bill through Parliament on school transport in 2004 to get rid of this ludicrous eligibility and non-eligibility system, which doesn't line up with today's normal work. I mean, people don't walk 3 miles to school anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. So this ludicrous 3-mile, 2-mile age-related ratios, we should be looking at ensuring that we look at the air quality outside schools. I know we are doing that to some extent, but what percentage of that is created by parents driving their kids to school? What percentage of those air quality hotspots, dark spots if you want, are created by parents doing that? I know we've had kids out with their clipboards and everything else, but how much are we measuring of this so that we can actually say we have made a difference? Now, I'm pleased to say that you're not going to be getting the quick win from the COVID lockdowns, that you are going to look at the statistics so that, it makes a more realistic assessment. So congratulations on that. But I want to see timelines, I want to see measurement, so that we can actually determine progress. And I don't see this in this report, I'm afraid. It's the same with many of the district councils and borough councils, come up with great plans, but there's no management of the statistics, and there's no measurability of any progress. So that is my concern. I'm glad to see the plan, but really worried that we're actually putting this emergency on the back burner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Tagg for a response, Councillor Clements has indicated, I think it might be to do with the empty seats thing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on the back of what Councillor Atkins has just said, I've driven here today. I've got an electric vehicle, and currently there is nowhere for me to charge. There's one at Stafford Hospital. I don't know how many miles away that is. And there's one at Stafford Borough Council, I believe, which I don't know how I would get there from there to here. I'm not au fait with Stafford as a town centre myself. I welcome the report. I think the report has gone above and beyond in certain areas. Yes, there is room for improvement. There was always going to be. And I do welcome the timelines, but we're all being asked to get rid of our diesel, petrol vehicles, but then we need to make sure the infrastructure is there for us to be able to charge whilst we're here. For me, it's a 60-mile round trip. I can get here on without charging and can get home. But it would be nice for us to have that infrastructure for when we're all going to be driving milk floats and not just a few of us. Thank you.
Okay, I will invite Councillor Tagg to respond to the comments that Councillor Atkins made, which was all about measuring progress, timelines and the sense of urgency.
Thank you, Chair. I think, obviously, as I said in the introduction, it says in the plan, it's a 5-year plan. And I think everybody will accept that the Action Plan 1 was a reaction, a quick reaction to the climate change emergency motion that the Council passed. I think now, with those theme groups where the officers have been building this up from the bottom, really, I think that's the right way to do it. Members can sit in a room and say what our priorities are for climate change, but I've been interested to hear what our staff in key areas, such as those dealing with highways, such as those dealing with the environment, etc., have been the building blocks for this. And I think that is the right thing to do. And I think for action plans, you do need, Charlotte, Councillor Atkins, you do need timelines to work to. And they're being developed at the moment, and I'm sure Clive could possibly come in and give you more details on that. I think it's really important that we do have those going forward. And I can assure Charlotte and others that this is the central plank, really, of the Council's policy going forward. Every council, as you say, is putting forward plans in this area. Some are doing better than others. I want us to be one of the best, and developing that as we go forward is one of the key priorities for this portfolio. But Clive.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Yeah, I think in terms of measurability, I mean, behind the plan does sit a wider plan with a lot more detail to it in terms of accountability for officers, key KPIs, etc. So, but it is developing. I mean, that's absolutely, and we're on a sort of 29-year journey here to get to 2050. But you know, and that's something which we would need to hone and improve as we progress with the plan. But you know, those things are in progress.
Did you want to come back, Charles?
No, Chair, because I think I've just had very general responses, and I think it really underlines the point I was making earlier, that we really do have to make progress. We can't keep on talking about the future. You know, is this all going to happen in 2025? Because you know, that's what the timeline seems to suggest.
Okay, I've got three other indications to speak. I've got Councillors Pert, Heath and Worthington in that order. Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Interesting comment in response to Councillor Atkins that it's a 29-year journey. I hope we don't look at it that way, because it should be no more than a 29-year journey. And that may be just an unfortunate slip of the tongue, and the problem with people like me is I listen to what people say. So I'm not going to focus in on that, but I would encourage people to look at it as, if we can get there quicker, then we need to, because that demonstrates the emergency. I have a phrase which is, if my house was on fire, would I do this? And I get some of a sense of a plan being pulled together. But I guess where my head is a couple of places. Well, what I think this plan lacks, and I hope will be incorporated into the plan before it goes to Cabinet, or maybe going forwards as it's reiterated over the years, is the role in influencing. One of the things that we learnt from the COVID pandemic was we didn't have to own all the assets and just worry about our own toolkit. We could actually partner with people and work with people to get to a wider end game. And I think the County Council is a £500 million organisation. And the biggest opportunity for me is not in our own areas, our own areas of influence, but is in those areas where we can actively persuade. And I know there's a lot on business in the document, and there is no doubt a lot of sub-plans. But what can we actively be doing to persuade those people who may not be on this same agenda with the same urgency that we have, to actually adopt that and move it further forward? And by which I mean some of the commissioned providers. We've deliberately ignored them. What about, I mean, we're a big spender on services, and we have a role to play in that. We should be making sure that's key within our procurement criteria. Key, not just in there, key. Because it doesn't demonstrate the urgency and the importance that this County Council, holds to it. Another example is county farms. Now, I know that's within our toolkit, arguably, but arguably it isn't, because they're tenanted. You know, they're not run by the County Council, they're tenanted. But, you know, what can we be doing in terms of tree planting? Because it isn't until 10 years in or more that actually trees provide that ability to eat up CO2. And I'm with Councillor Atkins. I would like to have seen, you know, sort of just, you know, what the step, you know, what does good look like at the end of the first year? What does good look like at the end of the second year? Knowing that we're not storing it all up to year 5. The second point I wanted to make was about what are the innovative things that we could be doing by taking a step change look at doing things in a different way. Electric cars were mentioned earlier. There are several charging points around Stafford. I just mentioned Stafford Borough Council's car park at the bottom, just across the way. There is one over on Tenterbanks, and I'm happy to give the member a list of where they all are, just to facilitate. Perfect. But my point really is about step change. You know, what are the step change technologies? What are the things that we're actively looking at and pushing, and what are we pushing government on? So, you know, we're in the middle of spending quite a bit of money, quite rightly, on Warmer Home Staffordshire, bringing off-gas gas properties onto the gas network, because otherwise they're using electricity, which is a dirty and expensive form of fuel. But actually, what are we doing then to say, when gas goes, because it will go, what is the replacement for gas? And what's our role in trying to persuade others of hydrogen or other things? And it seems to me that we've done a lot of good knitting, but we haven't necessarily said, yeah, and what's our real step change ambition over here? Because it probably does take some brave souls, the likes of Branson, to actually start beating that drum and going that extra mile. I'll finish there if I can. Thank you.
Can I take Councillor Heath next, then we'll have a response from Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, yeah. Just like to endorse what Councillor Atkins has been saying. It is just such an easy win. You see these school buses trailing around the villages, 3 or 4 villages, because all the village schools are closed. They all closed years ago, so they have to go a good way into school. There's half the school bus empty, and then the cars follow behind. It is absolute. The times I've walked 2.99 miles and not been granted a bus ticket because it's not the magic 3, it is ridiculous. You can ask Andrew, I can't give his name now, on the education. We've walked many times. And it's such an easy win, isn't it? And then congestion at the schools, as I've come today down from Birchall, you know, the school gates there, it's a nightmare. Well, it's such an easy win to take back to the Cabinet and sort this out. And while you're telling them, I understand that Derbyshire County Council are similar villages to Staffordshire Moorlands. They've got round this vacant bus scheme. Because of the isolation of the villages, they've talked to the DFT or whatever, and they've resolved the issue. So have we tried to resolve the issue about the vacant seats because of the isolation of the villages? I've had a lovely letter back from Jonathan saying it's 1% of the population, school population. He doesn't say where those 1% live. They're not going to live in Tamworth or Stafford, are they? Or Stone. They live in my patch of the world. And it is a big thing. So I'd like you to take that back to the Cabinet, because that is so many cars every day not on the road at no extra cost to the County Council. In fact, they pay to go on if they haven't got the the proper tickets. So it's a gain for you. It's money made as well. And I really think, another thing while you're talking to your Cabinet colleagues, what about planning? I've still got very, very deep scars from when my son applied for a wind turbine. It's 8 years ago now? I can tell you the scars don't go away. There are still people who will not speak to me or will not speak to Stuart because he got the nerve to apply on a 700-acre farm for one small wind turbine to help fund his dairy plant. We applied for a big one first. Because of all the controversy, we scrapped that and we had a small one. We should have stuck to our guns because, the costs of, I don't know, it's so easy to knock the farmers. But when the farmers try to do something to help with climate change, he's got solar panels on the shed roofs, he's got his wind turbine, he plants hedgerows, he plants trees, he does all he can, and all he gets is abuse and, criticism. So what about the planning? What about planning for climate change? That's a big thing. A lot of the county farms have been mentioned. They could have a small wind turbine. Maybe there could be a grant to help them. They're not cheap things to do. I know you get it back over the years, but they're not cheap to put in. Things that are an instant win. We're doing something to provide clean electricity now, not just a talking shop. Sorry, I've got on my hobby horse. Shut up.
Okay, before we get too far down the track of discussing the empty seats policy, I just want to invite Councillor Clements to comment, because I know it's part of her committee's remit, whether there's likelihood of you wanting to take that on as an issue. I know Councillor Tagg's been asked to take it back to Cabinet, but I wonder if you want to comment.
It's currently not on our agenda, but I have spoken to Jonathan Lindop, my scrutiny officer, and I think it's going to be added maybe November meeting. It's not on the September one because obviously the papers have already gone out for that. We have got the bus strategy on the September meeting, I believe. So we'll look at it then.
Okay, I'll just bring Nick in to comment.
Just supporting Councillor Clements. I'm aware there's an email been sent to you because the MTFS working group have made the comment about the vacant seat programme. I'm assuming, Councillor Clements, that Jonathan or yourself will put it forward at your meeting, which I think is next week or the week after next, for inclusion on your work programme. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I've got 4 more indications to speak, but I'll bring in Councillor Tagg now.
Thank you, Chair. Responding to Councillor Pert, I think we as a county council should show leadership in this area, and I'm completely convinced that's what we've got to do. That's working with our districts. He'll be aware we're planning to get together a sustainability board of districts, portfolio holders and county portfolio holders, myself, to work together and there's a lot of good work going on across the county in various areas. Talking about biodiversity, Staffordshire Moorlands doing a lot of work in that and other areas. Newcastle doing really well on its recycling, etc., and its food waste collections. Bringing that sort of brain together almost to be able to look at some of these problems, problem solve, get things moving. And also an officer group that sits around that as well, with officers coming in from across the districts as well to create almost like a virtual hub of officers to work on this. I think that's key. As you know, we've launched our Do It for Staffordshire, Make It Sustainable campaign, which is, I hope everybody signed up to the email for that, for tips on sustainability and climate change issues. That is key to get the message out there. There's a massive comms message here. The county has just taken on a comms team dedicated to the climate change agenda, which will get that message out there, change people's perceptions and also people's, the way, give them an opportunity, give them some advice to be able to carry out their lives more environmentally friendly and carbon neutral as well. And also through the business community, as I said in my introduction, working with the business network, we need to develop that even further. What we're going to do, and what we're still doing, is building a team around this, and there is funding available for an officer to look at as a whole how we reduce carbon and how we can advise districts, work with districts and also with businesses as well. So there's a lot going on at the moment. We're building a team, and I'm convinced that that's the best thing we can do to move this forward. I've become portfolio since May. I'm going to give this a kick up the backside to ensure we move forward on this. And of course, we have that target of 2050, but this is a 5-year plan, and I completely agree with you. We need deliverables, and demonstration of deliverability over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and I'll be ensuring that officers include that. Councillor Heath, yes, I know the vacancy seat issue is a massive issue particularly in your rural wards, and I think I support the position that Jonathan has taken. I think from a climate change perspective, there are other ways of getting young people to school, whether that's car sharing, managing journeys better and planning them better, or arranging with family members. And I think it is a small cohort across the county, but I'm not saying that isn't something we should be taking seriously. And Cabinet is doing its engagement and survey, and it'd be interesting to see what the results of that come out. And I'm sure Jonathan, as you know, I saw Jonathan on the news last night and has been fronting this for the county council, and he feels passionately about what we're trying to achieve, but also he knows that the legislation has changed, just as you do, Councillor Heath, that doesn't allow us to carry on the vacant seat scheme as we did before. Yeah, I'm sure if, we'll look into that, and I'll pass that on to Jonathan about the Derbyshire issue. Just on the planning issue, Chair, which was a good point raised by Councillor Heath. Obviously, as districts do their local plans, it's important that we may ensure, and they're ensuring as well, that we have the climate change agenda in there. We're just doing a new local plan in Newcastle, and it's front and foremost in that plan. I think when we look at developments, whether they're the road network, whether they're housing developments or business developments, we need to ensure that the climate change priorities we've got are in those, so we start to win by getting the developers to do some of the work, as part of their planning applications as well. So that's a key relationship which we need to develop further with the districts. It's there at the moment, but it needs to develop further. And again, that will be officers' capacity that we need. And Clive and the team, you're building your team, and there is funding to do that through the Climate Change Fund, taking that forward. So please rest assured that we are working to get up to speed on some of the things where we aren't. And to get, as Charlotte said, we need to be achieving things and making a difference sooner rather than later.
We've got a few people queuing up to speak. I'll bring... Yes, okay, yeah.
Sorry, in coming back, can I encourage the Cabinet member to look wider than just having a Staffordshire-wide districts and boroughs scheme? I don't see why you couldn't have people like the LEP there, and the NHS as big funders, and some of the other big parties who also have an absolute role. And if we're working to a joined-up Staffordshire plan across a wider range of, I don't want it to be a talking shop. I don't think it should be a talking shop, but it's the ability to try and press everyone on the same agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Quickly come back on that, I neglected to say the other partners actually, because obviously Keel University as well, and the universities are a key partner, but also underneath that is the community groups that are coming forward as well, and that's being coordinated through a Staffordshire-wide body, which we need to work with, and we will be working with, and there's things going on in Utoxeter, there's things going on in Leek, in Burton, in Newcastle. We need to, community is coming from below almost, we need to capture that as well in part of the, when we move this drive, and I think everybody should be thinking about, mitigating climate change and creating that sustainable environment which we all desperately need going forward.
Okay, I've got 5 people queuing up to speak. I'll take a couple of W's next. Councillor Worthington, followed by Councillor Wilmer.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel a little bit of a shame for our climate change gentlemen. It's a bit of a poison chalice, really, because it's such a, well, it's very important to this, to the whole world, never mind just to this Staffordshire County Council. But I feel a bit disappointed that poor old Councillor Clements has come in today and she's got nowhere to charge her vehicle. It's all right talking about these things, but I think one of the first things we should do is prioritise some of these charging points. If we're going to encourage folks to have electric cars, we should be making every effort to make sure that when she comes into the council chambers, there's somewhere to charge her vehicle up. I mean, I've got a hybrid car because I've not much faith of getting stuck in a traffic jam on the M6 going to see my daughter for a few hours, and my battery packs up. At least with the hybrid, I've got a bit of diesel still to go on there. But I think it's important that we actually do something rather than just talk about it. Thank you.
Okay, if I could take Councillor Wyman.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would firstly like to agree with Jeremy and actually a lot of what most people have said today. I think the hardest part of all of this is the collaboration with partners. And it's the one thing that we tried, and when I was a Cabinet Support Member for this area, that was one of the things that we really wanted to do well on. We got so far, but we did not achieve getting partners round a table and having a proper discussion to see where we each could help each other to try and drive forward some of the actions and to meet some of the targets that a lot of these organisations have. What progress have we had on that collaboration? So last year, and then what is planned for the future? And I've got a few more questions, Chair, if you don't mind.
Okay, do you want to take the aspects of charging points and progress on collaboration then?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, under the action plan to CN 0821, there's a section there on actions on the electric charging. It is going too slow, isn't it? And I think it needs to be, sort of push forward and working, particularly with our districts and their town centre car parks. We in Newcastle, for example, we've got a town deal funding £23.5 million from the government in there as a slab of money for charging points in the car parks. It's bringing that funding in to achieve that, isn't it? So they're readily available in places, the destination where people are going to, that they can charge up if they need the extra juice, so to speak, on that. The relationships, yes, I think that you'll be aware, Con, about the Keel piece of work that was going on and has been going on, and I think you can give us a bit more information on the Keel work, which is touching on that sort of getting that brain together, isn't it? As I talked about with Jeremy, and getting us to a united point of actions where we can really make a difference. But James.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. Just an update on the Keel workshops. So Keel facilitated 3 workshops over the past 9 months where all the districts and boroughs and ourselves were represented. Some elected members were there, and not all the districts were there all the time, but they were all there some of the time. The general feedback was we're all in the same situation. We all need to make action, and this is an emergency, and most of the authorities have signed up to the declaration. At the end of the third workshop, Keel came forward with a proposal which I think they're going to take to chief executives in the next 4 to 6 weeks. But to give you a summary of that, all the districts and boroughs wanted to work together. There was an appetite from officers, members throughout to work together. I floated across there the forming of a joint sustainability board, and would that suit well with all the districts and boroughs. Met with broad agreement because it would follow ways of working that we're all familiar with, committees, structures, ways of doing things, committee papers. It was noted that it shouldn't be a talking shop, but it needed to be action. And then off the back of that, we have progressed that and started to sort of pull together terms of reference for a joint sustainability board. So I think it's all really positive. I think one thing I did take away is everyone is very serious about this, and everyone does want to make a difference. And I think together, we should go forward together.
Okay. Next speakers are Councillor Peters and then Councillor Oates. Oh, sorry, did you want to come back, Councillor?
I'll wait for other speakers and then I'll come back if that's okay, Chair.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Some observations and a few points for clarification, if I may. Looking at the document that's been presented to us today, and I recognise it's a draft document, and the comments that I've heard, I don't get a sense of pace. We're talking about, we can't wait for climate change. Climate change is here. It's a constant drumbeat message, and I was hoping that I would see, in various guises, a clear message that the County Council, through you, Councillor Tagg, were adopting a sense of pace. Now, I just wonder whether there are any resource limitations. Have you got enough staff to do it? Have we got enough in the officer team to do it? And are there any particular expertise that we may be short of? We mentioned infrastructure a moment ago, and Councillor Tagg talked about planning. Burton is a district council, of course, and we have many housing developments underway at the moment. And I thought immediately of the constitution of the planning committee at East Staffordshire. We have representatives from the county who sit on there to monitor and listen to infrastructure needs. I just wonder whether you will give some thought when the time is right for the appropriate development, for example, that you would arrange for a climate change expert to sit on that panel and help the districts understand what we're doing. It will be a visible presence that the county are taking this seriously. We're not holding anyone, well, are we holding people to account? I don't know. But I think this is all about visible presence and getting a message into local authorities and the community. This document also talks about behaviours. Now, I'm, as the Cabinet member at East Staffordshire Borough Council responsible for climate change, I'm pitching it initially at educate and inform children. Because I know that parents and grandparents are more likely to listen to what their children are saying than to what I would say as an elected member. So if we can get into schools, and I'm hoping with my officer team to be able to do something like that, get into a Q&A session with sixth formers or even the younger people in school and ask them if they can get the message into their relatives about the importance of this. And hopefully they will take notice of that. And finally, we talked about car charging points. In my division in Burton, we have many areas that are populated with terraced housing. Now, I don't think there's any ideas coming forward as to how people who live in a terraced house can charge their car easily. We can't have cables running across the pavement, and the cost of putting something onto their properties perhaps would be prohibitive. So I wonder whether we could put that somewhere in the action plan. We've heard about rural, we've heard about towns. I'm talking now about areas with densely populated terraced housing. Is that something that we could address? Because I'm being asked questions, well, I want to buy an electric car, but how am I going to charge it? And I live in a terraced house. Thank you.
Okay, can I bring in Councillor Oates before I have a response?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start by picking up the point that Councillor Peters has just raised in terms of on-street electric charging. There are options, and they consist of using bollards or lampposts to provide charging points. I've got a whole presentation which I'm quite happy to share with the committee, but that sits squarely with Staffordshire County Council. Yet the line we've got in the report is we need to work with districts on an electric vehicle charging, my screen's gone off, strategy or whatever. For me, there's two parts to this. There's the car parks which were mentioned earlier, and the on-street parking, but there's also what are we doing to drive that change? We can only lead the public to electric vehicles if we get our own house in order. Councillor Clements has driven here today in an electric vehicle. She didn't offer me a lift, so I've driven in a petrol vehicle. But anyway, and she hasn't got a charging point. As an authority, we can drive the agenda by supplying our staff and members with a charging point. If we can't get our own house in order, how can we expect the public to follow our lead? So that brings me on to the next point, which is about our energy addiction. And we talk about wind power or green energy or whatever. We're still consuming massive amounts of energy every day. The last 2 years, we've been pretty much locked in our homes. But do you know what? We've found ways to get around those problems and deliver what we need to deliver in terms of services. Yet in this document, I don't see much of the learning from the last 12 months coming through and saying we are going to change the way we work so we don't have to travel into work, or so that we can take advantage of online meetings. I'm just using some very bland examples, but it's about that change in our behaviour, because changing our fuel supply from fossil fuel to green, we saw the headlines this week. We've had to power up a coal-fired power station, I believe, because there was a deficit on the national grid. If we keep consuming energy, we're going to keep running into these problems. So we need to change the way we behave. The other disappointing thing from this climate change thing, I'm being very critical, sorry, Simon, is in terms of modal shift with transport. We had a load of cash last year for cycleways. Tamworth, Jill will have a fit at this. Tamworth is 4 miles by 6. That's it. We've got 6 county councillors, but that's the size of it. A third of the population in Tamworth drive to work. They live in Tamworth and drive to work. The longest journey you're going to have there is 6 miles, yet we don't have the investment in our existing cycleways, which have a cracking network. They're overgrown, the street lighting's poor, the surfaces are poor. We're not pushing the modal shift towards those, and I appreciate when it's raining, no one wants to be on a bike. Wilnecote Station, which is in Tina's borough patch, has no bike lockers. What are we doing as a county council to lobby the operators of places like this to say, you know, we're going to do our bit, but you need to do your bit so we can work in a greener way. And my final rant, Mr. Chairman, is about water, and I appreciate this could be a planning issue for the districts and boroughs, but I think somebody needs to take a strategic lead. And the question I ask myself regularly is, why am I flushing my toilet with water that has used electricity to be cleansed and pumped to my property when there's adequate water running onto the roof of my house every week that I could use to flush a toilet without any challenges to my health? We need to make these behavioural changes. And I appreciate this is a high-level document and we've got a lot of work to do, but there's some stuff in there that I think we just need to get on with. The electric vehicle one, you know, let's take the lead, let's supply our staff and members with an opportunity to charge, and actually then we can say to the public, this is what we're doing.
Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Tagg. There's a bit of a shopping list now because I've noted what Councillor Peters said. So the presence of a climate change experts with local authorities, liaising on charge points with the district, involving sixth formers, Councillor Oates leading by example, changing the behaviours, how we go about lobbying, and lastly water recycling. Starting now.
Chair. I think just Councillor Peters, again, was a lot of members have asked for pace, haven't they? And in defence of the document in front of us, which is a 5-year plan, if we achieve, all of these things within here over the 5-year period, we'll be doing really well. And I think what we need really, which is lacking in this, which will be ensure we have it in time for Cabinet, is that framework of measuring how we deliver these things. I think that's something I'll take away from today. That expert, I think he talked about that, building that sort of brain, isn't it? And it's not necessarily be a county expert, it could be a district expert that's part of the team, but each district and the county have its specialities, and we must all be feeding our officers. Every officer should be a climate change officer in this authority, I believe. And when it comes to, educating, as we call it, all going into schools, members should be, climate change ambassadors as well. And I think we all should have that role of pushing forward this agenda. On the charging at home, yeah, that's going to be a massive issue, isn't it? I live in a townhouse terrace street. Luckily enough, I've got a driveway, so I could have a charge off-road, but many people in my street and in the locality don't have that. So that's a really important thing, has been, and the suggestion put forward by Jeremy is one we should look at. And I think, Clive, I'm going to bring you in because you said you wanted to on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tagg. I guess just a couple of points on the EV side. I mean, I think the first electric charging points in Staffordshire were actually installed by Staffordshire County Council, albeit many years ago, back in 2012. So I guess we have been linked into this agenda for some time. Talking to other authorities, I mean, it's absolutely clear that this is a significant challenge for all highway authorities right across Britain, and probably wider than that as well. I think the stats are something like 80 to 90% of charging at the current time is actually happening at home. So that's probably not surprising for those that do actually have an electric car. That's where it's happening right now. And I think 40% of homes in Britain don't actually have access to a driveway. So, you can see straight away the challenge for, if everyone has charging at home right now, that's clearly going to be a significant barrier. I mean, a lot of authorities have looked at potential solution, running cables from lighting columns. I mean, like all these things, it's not that easy because the cable network that goes to the majority of streetlights just isn't up to the job for taking that sort of power. And I guess there's sort of a challenge back that if somebody suggested that we'd have a petrol pump outside everyone's house, that sounds rather odd. So I think we just need to take stock. We're talking to other authorities. And, there's a role here. What is the County Council's role in terms of putting in EV points? Clearly, we should be trying to put those points in at places of work, parking, public parking areas. But in terms of that wider agenda, the commercial market's starting to get active in this field now. And we need to be in that space, but watch, because clearly every pound we spend of public money, we need to make sure that it's not wasted and that the commercial sector may actually step in.
I think the last point was on the water and the flushing. I mean, that's an obvious example of where we waste water, isn't it? And I think going back to what we said about working with planning and planners and local plans and the standards in planning, the house builders need to sort of have that built into their, whether they use water that's already been used for other means, or they block out the systems to ensure that only half the water is used. That would be a good start, wouldn't it? So I think that's something which, again, through the Sustainability Board, and that sort of, I keep referring to it, the brain almost of this for the county, involving outside partners such as Keel University, who are, experts in this area and, national leaders. We're really good that we've got that university within the county and is feeding in, as James said, into our proposals and our district colleagues' proposals. So I think all that can be picked up in that, and it's a point which we need to take forward, and it's just atrocious that we do waste water in that way when it could be done so differently.
Any responses from Councillors Peters or Councillor Oates? No? I'll bring in Councillor Thompson then, Samantha Thompson.
Hello, it was just a quick question. Do we have a budget for a costing for what we want to achieve by 2050? I can't find one, and I'm just wondering if we do. We're asking for an awful lot of things to be placed and put in place and dealt with. However, if we haven't got a costing, we can't do it, can we? We can't achieve it. So do we need a costing?
It's a very valid question.
A very valid question, yes. I mean, the way it's approached is obviously there is the Climate Change Fund, which is not going to pay for all of this. It pays for some of the more high level, getting certain staff in that will then work with other staff. And I think that's the point. Every budget holder in this county has a responsibility for climate change and for ensuring that we put this plan in place. And I think that's what this is. This is a cross-organisation document, and budgets will have to be aligned with climate change, and that will be the strategic direction which the council will ask, and members will ask officers to go. And the strategic plan for the county council will be, the new one will be unveiled before the end of the year, and that will set out in there budgets, etc., and prioritisation, and climate change will be one of, if not the top one within there. So, but Clive, anything further to add on budget?
I guess obviously we do actually have a budget at the present time to sort of pump prime some initiatives, but of course, you know, we mustn't forget that a lot of activity has been happening over the last 10, 15 years anyway, and been led by, you know, existing budgets. And there's always opportunities nationally to bid for funds, so we need to look out for those opportunities. I mean, we've had recent funding successes, I believe, with sort of decarbonisation of buildings. And that's an ongoing agenda that we need to look at. I guess there is a link between the money available and the speed of change. I mean, an obvious example with that is possibly, you know, the vehicles that are managed by Fleet Care. I mean, the technology is probably there right now to swap them all out for either hydrogen or battery vehicles. But there's a question whether or not you let the existing leases run out, or whether you actually you know, which will obviously be cheaper, or whether you step in straight away. So I guess, you know, there's no two ways about it. The pace of change you want to achieve will be linked to the amount of money available.
Okay, Councillor Thompson's a very valid one. Comment is a very valid one. I'll bring in Councillor Wyman in a minute for the continuation of his comments. But I did look at the targets towards the end of the report. And for instance, target 8 is to increase the charge points. Well, increasing the charge points by 1 is a tick in the box. You know, we need more figurative analysis, I think, with a lot of the targets. And that goes back to the cost of them and the cost benefits. I mean, I'm aware of the fact that there has been money spent on the Climate Change Fund. I'm aware of the fact that we've, as the report said, saved £1 million on converting lighting, but why is it not £2 million? Why have we not doubled the amount of changeovers? Improving the energy efficiency of buildings is point 13. Well, is putting one light bulb in improving the energy efficiency? Is that enough? So it all goes back to, you know, having some figurative analysis. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a numbers person, and what's lacking for me, and this goes back to Councillor Atkins' first comment, you know, unless there's actually a figurative target, 2050 is a wonderful, nice rounded figure, date to pick, but what are we doing in 2021? What are we doing in 2022, which will allow us to get to where we think we're going to be in 2050? For me, there's the lack of any figurative analysis in the pack. Okay, I just thought I'd make that comment while I got the chance, and I'll bring in Councillor Wyman.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with the Chair. Just, I'll ask you a point-blank question, which is, what's the budget for climate change for FY 2021-2022? Because there is one. Clive?
It's a circular £500,000.
So that will not achieve perhaps 90% of what's in your draft plan. And that's clear. You cannot roll out EV charging points for 500 grand. You can't replace boilers, you can't replace or make buildings more energy efficient with £500,000. The only way you're going to do that is you're going to have to go and get agreement from your cabinet to agree capital spend, and that is where you're going to get the money to do this, or from government, who are going to give grant funding in order to put in the electric charging points in place, which I believe we have bidded for, especially in terms of the on-street car charging points. I think Louise, one of your staff members, was doing that. So, but there is nothing of concrete nature within this plan. When I came to look at the draft plan, the first plan, I can't see much more which has changed or anything which is new in this plan than what was in the old plan that was done very, very quickly with not a lot of resource and not a lot of time. I don't think we've moved on. This plan just seems to be a rehash of what we've already done. And so there are 2 points. The first is that we need some measurable goals over a period of years. We need a commitment to funding from the council, whether it is firstly income funding or capital. And we need to see that in the plan and how we're going to deliver it. And I'll give you an example. If we're looking at efficiency of buildings and reducing carbon emissions for this council, I'm not talking about the whole county, but for this council, and we've talked about this before because obviously I've worked with you guys before, is we need to say, these are the actions that we can take to reduce X amount of carbon, and this is how we're going to pay for it. And then you can see that we can meet a goal of some sort by 2030 or 2035, and then ultimately carbon neutral by 2050, if that is the goal. That isn't in the plan. That needs to be in the plan so that all of us can actually monitor how that will work in practice. And don't get me wrong, there will be tough decisions because you're going to have to say to the leader of the council, look, we want money for this, but actually that's going to have a massive impact on capital funding for, say, roads, or it's going to have a massive impact on the social care budget. So they're not easy questions, but those tough conversations need to be had now. It was those conversations that I wanted to have when I was Cabinet Support Member and wasn't able to have really with then the current leadership. We can have it now. I think there is an appetite for it, and we need to have it now so that we can get these figures on the table, because the next report should come back and say, right, we're going to need to borrow 100 million quid to bring this council up to scratch, and we can then lead by example. Because at the moment, we're not leading by example at all. As Tina quite rightly said, we haven't got an electric charging point. That just seems to be absolutely crazy. Of course, we may have them elsewhere, but not for this council. So if we are going to lead by example, I would say a couple of things. One is the target of net zero by 2050 ambitious enough for this council? Bearing in mind that is the minimum legal requirement that we need to meet. So should it be 2040? Should it be 2030? And how much is the Cabinet going to put into this agenda to make us, this council, a leader in climate change? And that's the question I think that should be answered by the Cabinet member. Thank you.
Okay, can I ask Councillor Tagg to respond, please?
Yeah, thank you. Just on the finances, which was the start of what Conor was saying, when it comes to such things as, getting in funding from outside, whether it comes to changing a boiler in a council office or a council building, obviously stock condition surveys take place. There's a department in the county council that will do that. This is not coming out of the money set aside for the climate change fund. That is a facilitating money. That's a capacity building money, so that we can then, those areas of the council that change the boilers will then be assisted in the job of upgrading their facility to be climate compliant and carbon neutral. So I think what Conor is asking for there is coming to the date, the 2050 date. That's the one that's set out by the government. That was in our climate change emergency motion, which is passed by this council. That is the one the Cabinet is working to at the moment. The government may change that and bring it forward to 2040 at some stage, and we will have to react to that. but at the moment we're working on the 2050. We have, you know, I know councils around the county are doing 2030 or doing other dates as well. For the county, we have we have our fleet care, we have our highways fleet, we have our waste management as well to consider, which is a large, carbon producing sectors which we need to, through this climate change plan, which is a 5-year plan. I think what Connor says about this is just like the old one brought forward. Well, I think then we're on the right track, because I think the old one set out the priorities we had back then when Connor was in the cabinet support position. And what this done is massively expands that over a 5-year period to achieve what we want to achieve, aiming towards that final goal of the 2050 target. So I think, I understand the bare bones of this are coming to you now. I think we've learned 2 things out of this session to take forward to ensure we get in there. That is that timescales. We need timescales against each of these within this 5-year, whether it's a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, 5-year. And also on the finances, we need a breakdown of that, because I can hand over to Clive now and you start rhyming off some of the finances that going into the the pot for this from other areas of the council where they're committed to signing up to the climate change agenda, whether it be in the stock condition area to ensure our buildings are carbon neutral, or whether it's applying for outside funding. For example, we're obviously working towards the tree planting for the Queen's Green Canopy, and we're looking to get funding in there to enable tree planting across the county to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, but also to kick off, give a spurt of growth almost to our tree planting as we aim to plant the trees. As Jeremy said, who's gone now, take 15 to 20 years to grow before we get the carbon offset off them. So there's a lot going on. It's all not in these reports. And the finances is an important matter, and something which we, the whole council, every department of the council, every cabinet member is a climate change champion as well. And every member in this committee is a climate change champion. So I would say we're on the right track. I would say the old plan has delivered for us, and this takes us into the next level on it. And I thank members for their input, and I think take a lot away from this, and we will put them, ensure they go into the report for the cabinet meeting in October.
Okay, now's probably a good time to mention that Councillor Tagg has requested that this committee form a small working group that would look at the climate change agenda and advise him of its views. So I'll just drop that into the members' thoughts, because we'll need to consider how that might be composed. But I have got indications to speak from Councillors Peters and Councillor Thompson. Councillor Peters.
Thank you. I think we're all grateful for the Cabinet member's report today and the way he's responded to our questions. But something has occurred to me as this debate's gone on, and I may have mentioned it at a previous sitting, that 2050 doesn't lend itself to developing a sense of pace. It's a long way off. It's 25 years away plus. So I think if we can get a more realistic, ambitious target, building on Councillor Wildman's very valid points, I think we could get a lot of confidence from knowing that everyone is totally committed, because the ambitious target is more realistic and, as they say, more in your face. Success is critical to this piece of work. We cannot fail. And that brings me back again. My nickname will be Pace. It used to be our 26 languages spoken in East Staffordshire. But I now feel that we must leave this meeting today mindful of the need to adopt a sense of pace. And when I look back now and see 2050, I'm thinking, crikey, I could be dead by then. So why should I adopt a sense of pace? You've got to get into the mind of people. This is all about mind change and behaviour change. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
It was only a quick one, sorry. The gentleman across the way said about the schools being green and everything like that. I do think the schools in my area are quite good at it anyway. for us to have to go back in and speak to them about it. I think they could probably tell us a thing or two, especially the primary schools. They are very, very good.
Tag?
Yeah, I think, as I said in the introductory remarks, the maintained schools, which we still have a responsibility for, we're working with them, particularly on their buildings, to ensure they're energy compliant. But of course, a lot of the schools now are self-governing. But I can speak for just as you can, councillor, for the in my area, you know, the recycling schemes the kids do, and the living wall which they built on the, instead of replacing it with a big fence and stuff like that. And they got some money from the climate change funding for that from the members fund. So there's plenty going on in schools. And I think again they are key partners. The schools are grouped into groups now, aren't they? We should be including those in our conversations, along with the universities and the districts and the community groups as well. It's an effort which we need to mobilise the entire county and all authorities and businesses and residents in the county. And as you're quite right, Councillor Pace, I mean Councillor Peters, we need that pace. If we call you Councillor Pace from now on, I've completely taken that on board, Councillor Peters, that pace and deliverability and deliverables within this document, and we'll take those away. And the document is 21 to 25, and I want to see these delivered, and we should all want to see these actions in here delivered towards the goal of 2050.
Councillor Wyman?
Yeah, I just wanted to just come back on the measurement and the kind of budgets and whatever and the figures that you were mentioning, Chair. Are we going to have a document at some point in the future which says that we are going to put in place 300 electric charging points within the first year, then the second year, then the third? Is that what we're looking at here? Because I think that's what I think we all want to see, so that when you come back in front of this committee, we can say, well, how many charging points have you put in last year? And you'll say 250, and we'll say, well, it's not good enough. You need to do better next year. But that's the only way we're going to hold you to account, because with the document that we've currently got, we simply cannot. And I know the reason why we can't. It's designed as a document so we can't hold you to account, because the figures and the timescales just aren't there. We need to do more work on it. It comes back to the point that Bernard raised, and I had the same problem, is about resource, commitment, time. Every one of you there has got other different responsibilities as well. Where is going to be the impetus? Is it going to come from a couple of members of staff? Are we going to have a working group, as potentially we are going to discuss? How are we going to drive this forward? Because at the moment, I feel that ever since I took it on, and I'm partly guilty for it as well, I had a year to try and get things going, we've kind of plateaued and flatlined. And we've done things like get a climate change fund, which has £1,000 to each councillor, but then what was that actually spent on? Was it really spent on climate change initiatives? Was it actually really going to make a difference? Or was it just a way of getting councillors to think that actually something was going on, but it really isn't going to make much difference? So how are we going to address the big issues, the things that cost a lot of money, and how are we going to make that progress? Because that's what I want to really see.
So, Councillor Tagg, if we can address this in terms of the suggestion of the working group, I think Councillor Wyman's put it very succinctly. All things to do with timescales, all things to do with budgets, all things to do with figurative analysis of the objectives are part of what needs to be agreed in the remit before we start out on that proposal.
No, I totally agree, and I think the working party would be, that's why I suggested it, Chair, before the meeting, is as we haven't got that sort of link to members within the council. I'm talking about the external links and how we're going to turbocharge those, but internally a sounding board, a monitoring body, I think would be ideal, and a subcommittee of this group would be great to assist us as we move forward. Just one point that Conor made on the climate fund, I see that as part of the comms side of this. I think it's members, again, having that little bit of money. I used it on 2 or 3 really good schemes in my division. We're reviewing that this time to try and open it up a bit. I think for me, as a member, I thought it was a bit too constrained in the criteria. I want to open it up a bit more for biodiversity projects and other things that don't hit probably the climate change right on the nail, but have associated effects and associated benefits. as well. So I think it's also part of a small amount of money for each member, enabling them to interact with their community, get the message out there about sustainable environment and the climate change agenda, and then see some results coming out of it. That's how that works. It's a small amount of money. It's something we intend to bring forward again this year, and we'll be announcing the criteria and the scheme at the Members Away Day in November.
Councillor Wyman?
Yeah, we just need to be careful of what the term is called greenwash, because that's basically what we're doing. We're just... Sorry. There we go. Sorry, yeah. So I think it's more about what we do. Are we going to tackle the big issues, or are we just going to have some token gesture? Because that's what it feels like, and that's what it felt like to me. We're not tackling the big issues as such because we haven't got that measurable timeline. We need that in place. So I do think we've got to tackle that. In terms of the working group, we had a working group, and then it vanished very shortly after I wasn't no longer cabinet support member. It should be back in place. It was a good forum. It got people talking about it. It got members involved, and there were some really good suggestions that did actually, I think, end up in the first draft of the Climate Change Action Plan. I think that's what members would like. I don't know why it disappeared, but now if we can get it back in place, I think people would certainly like to contribute to that.
Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Worthington.
Yeah, I think we're giving a bit of an unfair rough ride to this climate change subject, because it's all about monies, and I wouldn't like to see monies diverted from getting my potholes fixed into climate change. So let's be reasonable about this. I mean, I think with the money that he's got, I'm sure Simon will do an excellent role, and it's all right having working groups, but again, I'm sick of people saying we're talking about things. I would like to see some action, and I think electric charging points is certainly a good way to start. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Councillor Clements, did you indicate? No? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of things for the committee. One, to note that your comments and observations today will be taken forward to the Cabinet for their report in October, and the Cabinet member is nodding, so I assume that's okay. Secondly, just to note that climate change will be a key part of the members' event in late autumn, so there will be a further debate amongst the 62 councillors around where climate change is, and certainly to give you more information as to where it's going. The third point is, I would like to ask through you, Chair, whether the committee agreed to a working group on this matter, which I think the Cabinet member supports, and certainly Councillor Warman's comments support that. If we follow the mode that we're now operating with our new structure for scrutiny, it would be chaired by Councillor Warman as the Vice Chair for overview. But certainly I would need the committee to approve that working group, and then with the committee's approval, I will send out an email asking for nominations to sit on that working group and progress it further, Chair.
Okay, are members happy with that composition and route of composing? Councillor Wyman, would you be happy to chair it?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. And those meetings can be Teams or in person, can't they? Because it's a working group. Yeah.
Certainly, as it's a working group, it would not be a formally constituted meeting. So if you were willing to chair that, Councillor Wyman, you and I could work together, and we will work on the appropriate way of going forward. But Teams is certainly an option, yes.
Fantastic. I think we might get more attendance that way if it's a working group. But either way, happy. Yeah.
Okay.
So can I just, Chair, get the formal approval from the committee to appoint that working group?
Yes, can we have a formal proposal for adopting that committee? Councillor Peters, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Davis? Okay, is that agreed? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And just for the sake of passing on information, Councillor Atkins did indicate that she wanted to be involved. She's had to leave the meeting early, but she did say she wanted to be involved. Okay, is there anything else on that agenda item, or are you happy with that, Councillor Tagg?
No, thank you.
Oh, Councillor Heath.
Right comment, when we've got all these electric charges, where's the electric coming from?
Did you want to respond to that?
I mean, I can respond to it if you want. The government has to invest billions of pounds to fund basically renewable energy, nuclear power stations and whatever to produce the energy by 2050, and they need to act now, not in 20 years' time, which is exactly why we need to act now. There you go.
Bring you the letter I had from SCC condemning our application to build the turbine. Very strong and objectionable. And I tell you, I'll sign it if you like.
Okay, we'll then move on to item 5, which is the work programme. People got a copy of the work programme in front of them? Towards the back of the agenda, yeah. Yes, I'll ask Nick to talk us through that.
Thank you, Chair. So you've all got a copy of the updated work programme. So we've completed 7th of September, which is the Climate Change Annual Report and Action Plan 2, and we've agreed as a committee that you will form a working group to work with the Cabinet member and colleagues on the way forward. The next date is 1st of October, but that is reserved for any call-ins that we may receive. So your next formal date is the 5th of October. At the moment, the only substantive item on there is the Corporate Complaints Annual Report, which is a statutory report that you receive every year into the corporate complaints of the council. I am going to suggest to the committee, with your approval, Chair, is that part of the role of this committee is to oversee the overview and scrutiny function. So at that meeting, I would also like to bring the 4 work programmes of the 4 committees for you to consider, debate and look for any duplication or corresponding work. And then the next meeting after that will be the 16th November, Chair, when you receive the Q2 Integrated Performance Report, and you've also requested the item on the Council's performance in regards to the digital strategy. The one piece of work that I'm working on, Chair, is that we still are looking for a date for you to scrutinise the local enterprise partnership, which you said was a priority at the start of your year, Chair. So I'm working with the LEP on that to bring that forward as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anything else to comment or add on the work programme? No? Okay, there is no confidential section, so the exclusion of the public item is not necessary. Can I ask, though, that members of the MTFS group stay after the closure of this formal meeting, because we need to have an informal discussion about what we had from last week. So I'll ask those members of that committee to stay back, but I'll officially close the meeting at 11:20. Thank you.